She took care of an old man on the street without knowing he was the father of the most feared millionaire in the country. If you're a romance fan, subscribe, like, and tell me where you're watching from. Let's share the love. The autumn rain fell mercilessly over the cobblestone streets of Colmar, a small town in the Alsace region of France, where half-timbered houses seemed frozen in time. Olivia Parker hurried along Rue des Marchands, her worn coat doing little to protect her from the cold that seeped into her bones. At 28, she had learned that life rarely offered shelter when you needed it most. Her shift at the bakery had ended an hour ago, but Madame Dubois had asked her to stay late, again, without extra pay. Olivia couldn't refuse. She needed every euro to keep the tiny apartment she shared with her younger sister, Sophie, who was studying nursing in Strasbourg. After their parents died in a car accident 5 years ago, Olivia had sacrificed her own dreams of becoming a teacher to ensure Sophie could have hers. As she turned onto a narrow alley that served as a shortcut home, Olivia nearly stumbled over something or someone huddled against the stone wall of an old building. Her heart clenched. It was an elderly man, his silver hair plastered to his head by the rain, his clothes soaked through. He was shivering violently, his lips tinged blue. "Monsieur!" Olivia knelt beside him, her own discomfort forgotten. "Monsieur, can you hear me?" The man's eyelids fluttered. His eyes, when they opened, were a striking grey, intelligent despite his apparent confusion. He tried to speak, but only a weak cough emerged. Olivia looked around desperately. The alley was deserted, the shops closed for the evening. She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers, but the screen showed no signal, typical for this old part of town, with its thick stone walls. She couldn't leave him here to call for help. In his condition, every minute mattered. "Listen to me," she said firmly, leaning close so he could hear her over the rain. "I'm going to help you. Can you stand if I support you?" The man nodded weakly. Olivia slipped her arm around his frail shoulders and with considerable effort managed to get him to his feet. He was taller than she expected, but so thin she could feel his bones through the wet fabric of his expensive-looking suit. Now, ruined and muddy, her apartment was only 3 blocks away. It would have to do. The journey felt endless. The old man leaned heavily on her, his breathing labored, and Olivia had to stop twice to rest. Her own muscles screamed in protest, but she pushed forward, whispering encouragement to both of them. By the time they reached her building, a modest structure with peeling paint and a temperamental elevator, her entire body ached. She half carried him up the 2 flights of stairs to her door, fumbling with her keys. Inside, the apartment was cold. She turned down the heat to save money, but it was dry and safe. Olivia guided the man to the small sofa and hurried to gather blankets from her bedroom. "We need to get you out of these wet clothes," she said, returning with towels and a set of clothes that had belonged to her father. She'd never been able to give them away. "Can you manage, or do you need help?" The man's hands shook too badly to unbutton his shirt. Without hesitation, Olivia helped him, her movements efficient and respectful, like a nurse. She'd done this for her mother during her final illness. The memory stung, but she pushed it aside. Once he was in dry clothes and wrapped in blankets, Olivia made hot tea with honey and brought him a bowl of soup she'd made the day before. The man ate slowly, some color returning to his weathered face. As warmth seeped back into his body, his eyes grew more alert, studying her with an intensity that made Olivia self-conscious. "Thank you," he said finally, his voice rough but cultured, carrying an accent that suggested education and refinement. "You saved my life." "Anyone would have done the same," Olivia replied, though they both knew that wasn't true. She'd walked past homeless people before, offering a coin or a kind word, but never this, never bringing a stranger into her home. "What's your name?" he asked. "Olivia. Olivia Parker. French name, English surname," he observed with a slight smile. "My father was English, my mother French. And you are—" The man hesitated, something flickering in his eyes, caution perhaps, or pain. "Henri, just Henri." Olivia accepted this, sensing he had his reasons for privacy. "Well, just Henri. You should rest. I'll call for medical help once my phone gets a signal, or I can take you to the hospital." "No," he said quickly, almost desperately. "No hospitals, please. I'll be fine with rest." Olivia frowned. "You were hypothermic. You need proper medical attention. I'm old, my dear, but I'm not fragile. What I need is what you've already given me. Warmth, kindness, and safety." His grey eyes held hers with surprising strength. "Please, I'm asking you to trust me on this." Against her better judgment, Olivia nodded. There was something about him, a dignity beneath the vulnerability that made her want to respect his wishes. "You can stay here tonight. I'll sleep in my sister's room. But tomorrow, we're discussing a proper plan." "Thank you, Olivia Parker," Henry said softly. "You have a rare heart." That night, Olivia lay awake in Sophie's narrow bed, wondering what she'd gotten herself into. She knew nothing about this man except that he spoke like someone educated, wore an expensive watch she'd noticed while helping him change, and had eyes that held more stories than she could imagine. The next morning, Olivia woke to the smell of coffee. She stumbled into the kitchen to find Henri, looking considerably better, standing at her small stove with a skill that surprised her. "I hope you don't mind," he said, gesturing to the breakfast he'd prepared, eggs, toast, and coffee. "I'm accustomed to rising early, and I wanted to repay your kindness in some small way." "You didn't have to do this," Olivia said, but her stomach growled, betraying how hungry she was. She usually skipped breakfast to save money. They ate together, and in the morning light, Olivia studied him more carefully. Despite his age, she guessed he was in his 70s. There was something commanding about Henri. His posture was straight, his movements precise. This was not a man accustomed to helplessness. "Will you tell me what happened to you?" she asked gently. "How did you end up in that alley?" Henri set down his coffee cup, his expression growing distant. "I was escaping from people who want to control my life, who see me only as an asset to be managed." He looked at her directly. "I needed to remember what it felt like to be simply human, not a name or a fortune. But I underestimated how unforgiving the streets can be, especially for an old fool." "You're not a fool," Olivia said, "and everyone deserves to be seen as human." Something shifted in Henry's expression, gratitude mixed with an emotion Olivia couldn't quite name. "My dear, you truly have no idea who I am, do you?" "Should I?" Olivia asked, confused. Henry laughed, a sound of genuine delight. No, you shouldn't. And that, Olivia Parker, is the most refreshing thing that's happened to me in decades." Before Olivia could ask what he meant, her phone rang. It was Madame Dubois from the bakery, demanding she come in early for an unexpected catering order. Olivia's heart sank. She'd hoped to take Henri to see a doctor, but she couldn't afford to lose this job. "I have to go to work," she said apologetically. "Will you be all right here alone? Please don't leave yet. When I return this afternoon, we can figure out—" "Go," Henri said kindly. "I'll be fine. I promise I'll be here when you return." As Olivia rushed out the door, she missed the way Henri picked up his water-damaged phone and, with surprising dexterity, managed to power it on. The screen flickered to life, revealing dozens of missed calls and messages. One name appeared repeatedly: Ethan Miller. Henri stared at the name for a long moment before setting the phone aside. His son was undoubtedly frantic, having the police and his entire security team searching for him. But Henri wasn't ready to be found yet, not when he'd finally discovered something, someone genuine after so many years of empty luxury and hollow relationships. He looked around Olivia's modest apartment, taking in the patched sofa, the photographs of a happy family now gone, the books stacked carefully on makeshift shelves. This was a home built not on money, but on love and resilience. In one night, this young woman had shown him more authentic kindness than he'd experienced in his mansions and boardrooms. Henri made a decision then. He would stay a little longer, learn what he could from this extraordinary girl with her generous heart. And perhaps, just perhaps, he could give her something in return, though not in the way she might expect. What he didn't know was that his disappearance had already set events in motion that would change both their lives forever. Because Ethan Miller, France's most feared millionaire and Henri's estranged son, was not the type of man to sit idle when his father vanished. And when he discovered the truth about where Henri had been and with whom, everything would change. The morning rain began again, drumming against the windows like a warning neither of them heard. 3 days had passed since Olivia found Henri in the rain, and an unexpected routine had formed. Each morning she woke to find him already preparing breakfast. Simple meals, transformed by his obvious culinary skill. He insisted on helping around the apartment, though Olivia protested. He fixed her leaking faucet, repaired the wobbly table leg, and somehow made her threadbare home feel warmer. They talked for hours each evening. Henri spoke carefully about his life, revealing pieces, but never the whole picture. He'd been a businessman, he said, who'd lost himself in success and forgotten what mattered. He asked about her life, and Olivia found herself sharing things she'd never told anyone. Her grief over her parents, her fear that she was failing Sophie, her abandoned dreams of teaching. "Why did you give up teaching?" Henri asked one evening as they sat with tea. Olivia stared into her cup. "Sophie needed money for university. The bakery job pays immediately. Teaching would have required more training I couldn't afford. The choice was simple, but painful," Henri observed. "Love often is," Olivia replied with a sad smile, "but that doesn't make it wrong." Henri studied her with those penetrating grey eyes. "You're wiser than your years, Olivia Parker, and far braver than you realize." What Olivia didn't know was that 30 kilometers away in Strasbourg, a storm was gathering force. Ethan Miller stood in his office atop the Miller Tower, staring at the city below with fury barely contained. His father had been missing for 4 days, and despite deploying every resource at his command, private investigators, police contacts, security teams, there had been no trace. Until now. "Sir," his head of security, Marcel, entered with a tablet. "We've located his phone signal. It was briefly active yesterday in Colmar. We have a general location." Ethan's jaw tightened. Colmar, a picturesque tourist trap that Henri occasionally visited for its Christmas markets. But why would he go there now, and why turn off his phone? "Assemble a team," Ethan ordered. "We leave in 30 minutes. Marcel hesitated. "Sir, if I may, your father's phone was on for less than 3 minutes before powering down again. That suggests he's choosing not to be found. Perhaps we should—" "My father is 76 years old," Ethan interrupted, his voice cold. "He has a heart condition and needs daily medication. Every hour he's missing increases the risk. I don't care what he wants. I care about keeping him alive." At 35, Ethan Miller had built an empire that made older businessmen nervous. He'd taken his father's already successful investment firm and transformed it into something that dominated French commerce. Some called him brilliant. Others called him ruthless. No one called him warm. His relationship with Henri had been complicated for years, fractured by disagreements over business ethics and Ethan's single-minded focus on success. They barely spoke anymore, except about company matters. But that didn't mean Ethan didn't care. His father was the only family he had left. The drive to Colmar was tense. Ethan made calls, barked orders, reviewed security footage from train stations and toll roads. When they finally arrived in the old town, he felt his frustration mount. The narrow streets and historic buildings made surveillance difficult. Finding one old man here would be like finding a needle in a haystack. "Start with hospitals, hotels, and shelters," he commanded his team. "Question shopkeepers. Show his photograph. Someone must have seen him." Meanwhile, Olivia was having the worst day of her month. Madame Dubois had accused her of stealing from the register, a lie, but one Olivia couldn't disprove. She'd been suspended without pay pending an investigation. Walking home in the afternoon drizzle, Olivia felt tears mixing with raindrops. How would she pay rent? How would she send Sophie money for her books? When she entered her apartment, Henri took one look at her face and immediately guided her to the sofa. "Tell me," he said simply. Olivia broke down. explaining everything. Henri listened, his expression growing stern. "This woman, Madame Dubois, she's done this before. She makes accusations when she's short on money," Olivia admitted. "She blames employees, docks their pay, or fires them. Everyone knows, but we need the jobs." "That's not just unfair, it's illegal," Henry said, anger coloring his cultured voice. "Olivia, you must report her to the labor authorities." "With what proof? It's her word against mine, and she has lawyers." Olivia wiped her eyes. "I'm sorry, you have your own problems. You don't need to hear about mine." "Your problems matter," Henri insisted, taking her hand. His grip was surprisingly strong. "Listen to me carefully. You have shown me extraordinary kindness. You've asked for nothing in return, expected nothing. That is rare, precious, beyond measure. I want to help you." "You've already helped by fixing things around here," Olivia said with a weak smile. "And your company has been... It's been nice not to feel so alone." Henri seemed about to say something important when a sharp knock rattled the apartment door. Both of them froze. The knock came again, more insistent, followed by a voice that made Henri's face go pale. "This is private security working with local police. We're searching for a missing person. Please open the door." Olivia looked at Henry in confusion, but he stood quickly, his expression a mixture of resignation and something else, dread. "I'm sorry, my dear," he said quietly. "I'm so very sorry. This is going to be difficult, but please remember, none of this is your fault." Before she could ask what he meant, the door burst open. Apparently her cheap lock was no match for professional security. 3 men in suits entered, followed by local police officers, and then a 4th man who commanded every bit of space in the room, despite his calm exterior. He was tall, perhaps 6'2", with dark hair silvered at the temples and piercing blue eyes that could have frozen water. His suit probably cost more than Olivia's annual salary, perfectly tailored to his athletic frame. But it was his face that captured attention, classically handsome yet harsh, with sharp cheekbones and a jaw that looked carved from marble. This was a man accustomed to absolute control. Those ice-blue eyes swept the room, cataloguing everything in seconds before landing on Henri. Relief and fury warred in his expression. "Papa," he said, his voice tight. "Thank God, Papa." Olivia's mind reeled. Ethan Miller crossed to his father in 3 long strides, his hands gripping Henri's shoulders as if to confirm he was real. "Do you have any idea what you've put me through? 4 days, Papa. 4 days of imagining you collapsed somewhere, injured, worse. Your heart medication is in my jacket pocket," Henry said calmly, gesturing to the coat hanging by the door. "I'm fine, Ethan. As you can see." Ethan's gaze snapped to Olivia for the first time, really seeing her. She stood frozen near the sofa, her work uniform wrinkled, her hair escaping its bun, her eyes wide with shock. He assessed her in an instant. Young, pretty in an unpolished way, clearly poor given the apartment's condition. His expression hardened. "Who are you?" The question came out like an accusation. Olivia opened her mouth, but no sound came. Something about this man's intensity paralyzed her. "Her name is Olivia Parker," Henry said firmly, stepping between them. "And you will speak to her with respect, Ethan. She saved my life." "Saved your life?" Ethan's laugh was bitter. "From what? A comfortable bed and medical care? Or did she perhaps see an opportunity when an old man stumbled into her neighborhood?" The implication hit Olivia like a slap. "How dare you?" she whispered, finding her voice through shock. "I asked him for nothing. I helped because he needed help." "Of course you did," Ethan said, his tone suggesting he believed the opposite. He turned to his security team. "Search the apartment. Look for my father's belongings, particularly his watch and phone. Document everything." "Ethan, stop this immediately," Henry commanded, his voice carrying an authority Olivia hadn't heard before. "Miss Parker has done nothing wrong. She took in a stranger during a storm, fed him, cared for him, asked no questions, and demanded no payment. She doesn't even know who I am." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "She doesn't know?" He looked at Olivia again, skeptical. You expect me to believe you've been living with Henri Miller for 3 days and didn't recognize him. His face has been in every newspaper in France. Henri Miller. The name clicked in Olivia's memory. She'd heard it, vaguely, associated with business and wealth, but she didn't read financial papers, and she certainly didn't follow the lives of millionaires. I don't, she stammered. She doesn't pay attention to such things, Henri said, and there was almost pride in his voice. She works 2 jobs, supports her younger sister through university, and barely has time to sleep, much less read about people she'll never meet. To her, I was just Henri, just a man who needed help. Something flickered in Ethan's expression, doubt, perhaps, or confusion, but it hardened again quickly. Marcel, take my father to the car. Get him checked by Dr. Rousseau immediately. He looked at Olivia coldly. Miss Parker, I'll need you to come with us for questioning. Questioning? Olivia's voice rose. I've committed no crime. You harbored a missing person. I helped someone in need. There's a difference, or doesn't your money teach you that? The room went silent. No one spoke to Ethan Miller that way. His security team looked shocked. Even Henry's eyes widened, but Ethan's expression remained unreadable as he studied Olivia with new interest, like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. Papa, he said without breaking eye contact with Olivia, go to the car. I'll handle this. You'll handle this by treating her with the respect she deserves, Henri said firmly. He walked to Olivia and took her hands. Thank you, my dear, for everything. I'm sorry my world has intruded on yours, but this isn't over. I promise you that. After Henri left with the security team, only Ethan, Olivia, and 1 police officer remained. The apartment felt smaller, the air charged with tension. Ethan walked slowly around the room, taking in details. The patched furniture, the photo of Olivia's parents, the textbooks clearly borrowed from a library. You really didn't know who he was, Ethan said finally. It wasn't quite a question. No, Olivia said tiredly, and frankly I don't care. I saw someone suffering and I helped. If that makes me suspicious in your world, then your world is sadder than I thought. Ethan turned to face her fully, and Olivia forced herself not to step back. Up close, he was even more imposing, not just in size but in presence. This was a man who bent reality to his will. My father has a heart condition, Ethan said, his voice lower now, almost tired. He needs specific medication, specific care. Running off like this could have killed him. Can you understand why I was desperate to find him? Olivia softened slightly. She understood desperation, understood love twisted by fear. I can, she admitted. But that doesn't give you the right to treat me like a criminal. I gave your father everything I had, my food, my home, my trust, and I asked for nothing. People always want something, Ethan said, but there was less conviction in it now. Maybe in your experience, Olivia replied, but not in mine. In my world, we help each other, because that's what makes us human. They stood there, 2 people from completely different worlds, each seeing something unexpected in the other. Ethan saw strength in someone he'd assumed was weak, integrity where he'd expected opportunism. Olivia saw pain beneath the armor, loneliness masquerading as power. I need your statement, Ethan said finally, for the record. Then you're free to go. I'm already free, Olivia corrected quietly. I've done nothing wrong. As she gave her statement to the police officer, Ethan watched her, his mind working through calculations and assessments. She was telling the truth. Everything supported it. His father's condition had actually improved during his stay here, and the way Henri had spoken about her, defended her. His father hadn't shown such passion about anything in years. This woman, this ordinary baker from Colmar, had somehow reached his father in ways Ethan never could. That should have made him grateful. Instead, it made something else stir in his chest, something uncomfortable and unfamiliar. When the statement was finished, Ethan pulled out his checkbook. For your trouble, he said, writing a figure that made Olivia's eyes widen, and your silence. I don't want this incident in the media. Olivia stared at the check, then at him. For a moment, Ethan thought she might cry. Instead, she tore the check in half. I don't want your money, Monsieur Miller. I want you to leave." Ethan stared at the torn check on the floor, genuinely shocked. No one had ever refused his money. No one. "Miss Parker." "Leave," Olivia repeated, her voice breaking. "Please, just leave." As Ethan Miller walked out of her modest apartment, he found himself looking back once. Olivia stood framed in the doorway, small and defiant, tears on her cheeks, but her head held high. Something shifted in him, some locked door cracking open. He didn't know it yet, but his carefully controlled life had just been thrown into chaos. Because Henry Miller had no intention of letting this remarkable young woman fade into obscurity. And Ethan, despite his best efforts, couldn't seem to stop thinking about the girl who'd torn up his check and challenged him to remember his humanity. The storm had arrived, but it was only just beginning. 2 weeks passed. Olivia tried to return to normal, but normal had been shattered. Madame Dubois, perhaps sensing Olivia had somehow gained powerful enemies, had fired her without explanation. Finding new work proved impossible. Word had spread somehow, whispers that she'd been involved in something suspicious, with police at her apartment. In a small town, reputation was everything. Her savings dwindled rapidly. She'd sold her mother's jewelry, the last valuable thing she owned, to pay rent and send money to Sophie, who knew nothing of the crisis. Olivia couldn't bear to burden her sister, not when Sophie was so close to finishing her degree. Late October brought cold winds to Colmar. Olivia sat in her apartment wrapped in blankets, the heat turned off to save money. She'd gone to 3 job interviews that week. All had ended the same way. Initial interest, then a phone call, then rejection. Someone was sabotaging her, though she couldn't imagine who or why. The knock on her door made her jump. She considered not answering, but the knock came again, patient and persistent. Through the peephole, she saw an elegant older woman in an expensive coat, her silver hair perfectly styled. Curiosity overcame caution. Olivia opened the door. "Miss Parker?" the woman asked with a warm smile. "My name is Marguerite Laurent. I'm Henri Miller's personal attorney. May I come in?" Olivia stepped aside, her mind racing. The woman entered, her practiced grace making the shabby apartment seem even smaller. But there was no judgment in her eyes as she settled on the sofa, only kindness. "I'll be direct," Marguerite said. "Henri has been worried about you. He asked me to check on your well-being, though he suspected his son's overreaction might have caused difficulties for you." "Overreaction," Olivia laughed bitterly. "Is that what you call it? Your Monsieur Miller accused me of being some sort of con artist, had police search my home, and somehow managed to destroy my reputation enough that no one in Colmar will hire me." Marguerite's expression tightened. "Ethan ordered background checks on you. Standard procedure for his security team when dealing with anyone connected to Henri. Unfortunately, in a small town, such inquiries can be misinterpreted." "Nasa, misinterpreted as me being a criminal," Olivia said flatly. "I saved his father's life. This is how he repays me." "Ethan doesn't see it that way yet," Marguerite said carefully. "He sees a threat, a vulnerability. He's spent his entire adult life protecting Henri, sometimes from Henri's own choices. He's not cruel, Miss Parker. He's terrified of losing the only parent he has left. That doesn't excuse his actions." "No," Marguerite agreed, "it doesn't, which is why I'm here." She pulled an envelope from her purse. "Henri wanted you to have this. It's not charity, it's compensation for damages his son caused. Enough to cover several months of expenses while you find new employment." Olivia stared at the envelope, remembering how she'd torn up Ethan's check. But this was different. This came from Henri, from kindness rather than suspicion. Still, pride made her hesitate. "I can't accept this." "You can, and you should," Marguerite said gently, "because there's more. Henri is offering you a position." "A position?" Olivia repeated, confused. "Henri has a private library in his estate near Strasbourg. Thousands of books, historical documents, rare manuscripts. It's been neglected for years. He wants someone to catalogue and organize it properly. Someone educated, trustworthy and patient." Marguerite smiled. He says you studied literature and wanted to be a teacher. This would utilize those skills. Olivia's heart raced. Why would he do this for me? Because you did something for him that no amount of money could buy. You treated him like a person, not a fortune. And because he's a man who believes in repaying debts. Marguerite leaned forward. The salary is generous, includes room and board in the estate's staff quarters, and the work is meaningful. But I must warn you, accepting means entering Henry's world, Ethan's world. After what happened, I'd understand if you refused. Olivia walked to the window, looking out at Colmar's medieval streets. She loved this town, but it no longer felt like home. Everyone looked at her differently now, whispered when she passed, and Sophie's tuition was due in 6 weeks. This position could solve everything, but it meant facing Ethan Miller again. The man who'd looked at her with such contempt, such cold assessment. The man whose presence had made her feel simultaneously invisible and too visible, dismissed and strangely, uncomfortably seen. Does Monsieur Miller, the son, does he know about this offer? Olivia asked. Marguerite's smile turned slightly mischievous. Not yet. Henri wanted to make the offer first, then inform Ethan. He believes you have every right to work in his home, regardless of his son's opinions. That decided it. Olivia turned from the window. Tell Monsieur Henri I accept. When do I start? The Miller estate sprawled across 10 hectares of countryside outside Strasbourg, a 19th-century manor house surrounded by manicured gardens and ancient trees. Olivia arrived on a grey November morning, driven by one of Henri's staff, in a car worth more than she'd earned in 5 years. The house itself took her breath away. 3 stories of cream-colored stone, tall windows, and elegant architecture that managed to be both imposing and welcoming. Staff members nodded politely as she passed, and she wondered if they knew about the scandal, if they judged her. Henri met her in the grand foyer, his face lighting up. Olivia, welcome, welcome. He embraced her warmly, and she felt some of her tension ease. At least one person here was truly happy to see her. Thank you for this opportunity, Monsieur Miller, she said formally. Please, just Henri, he insisted. We're past formalities, you and I. Come. Let me show you the library. I think you'll find it extraordinary. The library occupied the entire west wing of the 2nd floor. When Henri opened the double doors, Olivia gasped. Floor-to-ceiling shelves held thousands of books, their leather spines glowing in the afternoon light streaming through tall windows. A rolling ladder provided access to upper shelves, and comfortable reading chairs clustered near a massive fireplace. The room smelled of old paper, leather, and history. It's magnificent, Olivia breathed, running her fingers along a shelf of French literature. I've never seen anything like it. My grandfather started this collection, Henry said with evident pride. Each generation added to it. But in recent years, with business consuming everything, it's been neglected. Books acquired but never catalogued, documents scattered, no proper organization system. I want you to restore its order, make it accessible again. Take whatever time you need. Olivia turned to him, overwhelmed. Henri, I don't know what to say. It's a dream. You gave me shelter when I needed it most, Henri said simply. Now I'm returning the favor, not a debt, a friendship. They spent the afternoon discussing the project. Henri showed her the staff quarters, a comfortable suite with its own sitting room, far nicer than her apartment in Colmar. She'd have evenings free, weekends off, and access to the library whenever she wished. It was perfect, almost perfect. When will your son be told I'm here? Olivia asked as they took tea in the library. Henry's expression grew serious. He's in Paris on business this week. I'll inform him before he returns. Olivia, I must be honest. Ethan will not be happy about this arrangement initially, but it's my house, my decision. He'll adapt. He'll see it as you choosing me over him, Olivia said quietly. That will make this worse. Ethan needs to learn that loyalty isn't a limited resource, Henri replied. I can care about you without caring less about him, but he spent so long building walls, he's forgotten what it's like to let people in. Over the following days, Olivia threw herself into the work. The library was a revelation. First editions of Victor Hugo, rare manuscripts of Voltaire, collections spanning centuries. She created a cataloguing system, photographed valuable items, began the slow process of restoration and organization. She also grew closer to the estate staff, particularly Marie, the head housekeeper, who'd worked for the Millers for 30 years. Over lunch one day, Marie shared the family's history. Madame Miller, Ethan's mother, died when he was 16, Marie said sadly. Cancer. It destroyed Henri. He buried himself in work. And Ethan became the man of the house overnight. He took care of everything. His father's grief, the business that nearly collapsed their entire world. He was just a boy, but he had to become hard to survive. That's terrible, Olivia said, her heart aching. It made him who he is today, Marie continued. Brilliant, successful, but unable to trust. He sees threats everywhere because he learned young that loss comes without warning. When Henri disappeared, it must have brought back every fear from his mother's death. Olivia absorbed this, seeing Ethan in a new light, still wrong in his treatment of her, but perhaps more wounded than cruel. Understanding didn't erase what he'd done, but it softened her anger into something more complicated, compassion mixed with hurt. On Friday evening, exactly 1 week after her arrival, Olivia was working late in the library. She'd lost track of time, absorbed in cataloguing a collection of 18th century poetry. The room glowed with lamplight, the fire crackling softly in the hearth. She didn't hear the library door open, didn't sense the presence behind her, until a sharp voice shattered the peaceful silence. "What exactly are you doing in my father's library?" Olivia spun around so quickly she nearly dropped the book she held. Ethan Miller stood in the doorway, still in his business suit, his tie loosened. He looked exhausted, shadows under those ice-blue eyes, tension in his jaw, but no less imposing. If anything, the weariness made him more dangerous, like a wolf too tired to bother with pretense. "I work here," Olivia said, recovering her composure. "Your father hired me." Ethan's expression darkened. He walked into the room with slow, deliberate steps, his gaze sweeping over the changes she'd made, the new organization system, the cataloguing materials, the laptop she'd borrowed to create a database. "My father hired you," he repeated, his voice deceptively calm. "To do what exactly? To organize his library, catalog his collection, restore order to—" "I know what the words mean," Ethan interrupted coldly. "What I'm asking is what you really did to manipulate an elderly man into bringing you into our home." The accusation stung worse this time because Olivia had begun to hope he might have reconsidered his harsh judgment. Clearly not. "I did nothing," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Your father offered me a job. I accepted. That's all." "That's all?" Ethan moved closer, and Olivia fought the urge to step back. "You take in a vulnerable man, play the angel of mercy, then coincidentally end up employed in his home? You expect me to believe that's innocent?" "I don't care what you believe," Olivia said, anger overriding intimidation. "Your father trusts me. That should be enough. My father is a brilliant man whose judgment has been compromised by loneliness and sentiment," Ethan shot back. "He sees the best in people, which makes him vulnerable to those who would exploit that. And you see the worst in everyone, which makes you blind to genuine kindness." Olivia's voice rose. "Not everything is a transaction, Monsieur Miller. Not everyone wants something from you or your money." "Everyone wants something," Ethan said, his face inches from hers now. "They just pretend otherwise until the price is right. So tell me, Miss Parker, what's your price? What do you really want from this?" "To work," Olivia practically shouted. "To use my education for something meaningful, to support my sister, to not worry about rent every month. That's what I want. A job, not a fortune, though apparently in your world those are the same thing." They stood there, close enough that Olivia could see flecks of grey in his blue eyes, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. The air between them crackled with tension. Anger, yes, but something else too. Something that made her breath catch and her pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Ethan seemed to feel it too. His expression shifted, confusion flickering across his features. He stepped back abruptly, running a hand through his dark hair. "This is inappropriate," he muttered, though whether he meant the conversation or something else wasn't clear. "Then leave," Olivia said, though her voice came out softer than intended. "This is my workplace. I have every right to be here." "It's my family's home," Ethan countered, but the fire had gone out of his voice. He looked around the library, really seeing the work she'd done. The careful organization, the meticulous notes, the obvious respect for the collection. "You studied literature?" The question surprised her. "At the Université de Strasbourg, 2 years before I had to leave to work." "And why did you leave?" "My parents died. My sister needed support for her nursing degree. Someone had to sacrifice, and it wasn't going to be her." Olivia met his gaze steadily. "Not everyone has the luxury of finishing what they start, Monsieur Miller." Something shifted in Ethan's expression, not quite softening, but a crack in the armor. "How old were you?" 23. Sophie was 18. "Gee, that must have been difficult," he said, and for the first time his voice held something other than suspicion. "It was necessary," Olivia replied. "Love isn't about grand gestures. It's about showing up when it's hard." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, studying her with an intensity that made her self-conscious. Finally, he said, "My security team did a thorough background check on you. You're exactly who you claim to be. No criminal record, no debts beyond normal living expenses, no suspicious connections. Your landlord says you always pay rent on time. Your former professors remember you as exceptional, and everyone who knows you speaks well of your character." Olivia blinked. "You're telling me this now, after you destroyed my reputation in Colmar?" "I'm telling you that I was wrong," Ethan said, the words clearly difficult for him. "About your intentions toward my father. You genuinely helped him. I should have seen that sooner." It wasn't quite an apology, but coming from a man like Ethan Miller, Olivia suspected it was close to one. "Thank you," she said carefully, "though it doesn't undo the damage you caused." "No," Ethan agreed, "it doesn't, which is why I won't fight my father on this employment. You can stay, work on the library. But understand this, Miss Parker, I'll be watching. If you do anything at all, to hurt or take advantage of my father, you'll discover exactly why people call me the most feared man in France." "I would never hurt Henri," Olivia said firmly. "He's been kinder to me than anyone in years. I value his friendship more than any job." Ethan's jaw tightened at the word friendship, though Olivia couldn't imagine why. "Then we have an understanding. Stay in your wing, do your work, and we'll have no problems." "Gladly," Olivia said. "I prefer to avoid you anyway." It should have been the end of the conversation. Ethan should have left, but he lingered, his gaze drifting to the book she'd been holding, a collection of Baudelaire's poems. "You read Baudelaire?" "I catalogue him," Olivia corrected. "But yes, I've read his work." "Why?" "My mother loved Baudelaire," Ethan said quietly, almost to himself. "She used to read to me from this collection when I was young." He reached out, his fingers brushing the leather cover, and for just a moment the harsh businessman disappeared, replaced by someone younger, more vulnerable. Olivia's heart squeezed. "Your father told me about your mother. I'm sorry for your loss." Ethan's hand jerked back as if burned, the walls slamming back into place. "My father talks too much." He turned toward the door, then paused. "The library closes at 10 o'clock. House rules. Make sure you're in your quarters by then." "Of course, Monsieur Miller," Olivia said with exaggerated politeness. He looked back at her, something unreadable in his expression. "Ethan," he said finally, "if we're to live under the same roof, you can call me Ethan." Before she could respond, he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. Olivia sank into the nearest chair, her legs suddenly weak. That conversation had been exhausting, like fencing with someone who knew every move before she made it. Yet beneath the conflict, she'd glimpsed something that made Ethan Miller infinitely more complicated than the cold businessman she'd first encountered. He was wounded, deeply, profoundly wounded in ways that success and power couldn't heal, and for reasons she couldn't explain, that realization made her want to understand him rather than despise him. which was dangerous, Olivia knew, because men like Ethan Miller didn't let people in. And women like her, ordinary, vulnerable, already too scarred by loss, couldn't afford to care about men who saw the world as a battlefield where love was just another weakness to exploit. Yet as she returned to her work, Olivia couldn't stop thinking about the way his voice had softened when he mentioned his mother, couldn't stop remembering the brief moment when his mask had slipped, revealing the boy who'd lost everything and learned to build walls so high no one could reach him. Understanding him was dangerous, but perhaps, she thought as she carefully shelved Baudelaire's poems, it was also inevitable. Their worlds had collided, and neither of them would emerge unchanged. Outside the library windows, the first snow of winter began to fall, soft and silent, covering the estate's gardens in white. Inside, Olivia worked by lamplight, unaware that in his study 2 floors above, Ethan Miller stood at his window, unable to concentrate on the documents before him, his mind filled with images of a young woman with fire in her eyes who'd refused to be intimidated by his power and had somehow made him question everything he thought he knew about trust, kindness, and the walls he'd built around his heart. The weeks that followed established an uneasy rhythm. Olivia worked in the library each day, losing herself in the beauty of forgotten books and the satisfaction of bringing order to chaos. Henri visited often, sometimes reading beside her, sometimes sharing stories about the collection's history. Their friendship deepened, built on mutual respect and the unspoken understanding between 2 people who'd both known loss. Ethan, meanwhile, remained a distant presence, glimpsed occasionally in hallways, heard sometimes in his study, working late into the night. They maintained a careful distance, speaking only when necessary, both pretending the tension between them didn't exist, but it did exist. Olivia felt it every time she passed his study and heard his voice on phone calls, authoritative and commanding. Felt it when she found books he'd taken from the library and returned with careful notes marking pages he'd found meaningful. Felt it most strongly during dinners with Henri, when Ethan would join them and sit at the far end of the table, his presence filling the room even in silence. December arrived, bringing heavy snow and the approach of Christmas. Olivia had planned to visit Sophie in Strasbourg, but her sister called with surprising news. She'd been invited to spend the holiday with her boyfriend's family in Lyon. Would Olivia mind terribly? "Of course not," Olivia said warmly, ignoring the ache in her chest. "I'm happy you won't be alone." After the call ended, she sat in her quarters, staring out at the snow-covered gardens. This would be her first Christmas truly alone. Their parents had died in March. She'd never faced the holidays without family. The prospect felt unbearable. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Marie stood at the door with a gentle smile. "Monsieur Henri requests your presence in the drawing room. He says it's important." Olivia found Henri seated by the fireplace, looking uncharacteristically serious. Ethan stood nearby, his expression unreadable. The sight of them together, clearly united in some purpose, made Olivia nervous. "Please sit," Henri said, gesturing to the chair beside him. When she did, he took her hand. "I have a request, my dear, a favor though I hate to impose." "Anything," Olivia said immediately. "I'm hosting our annual Christmas charity gala here at the estate this Saturday. It's a tradition. We raise funds for children's hospitals throughout France. This year, I'd like you to attend. Not as staff," he added quickly, seeing her expression, "but as my guest, as my friend." Olivia's mind raced. "Henri, I don't belong at a charity gala. I wouldn't know how to. I don't have anything appropriate to wear." "All arranged," Henri said with a wave of his hand. "Marguerite has selected several dresses for you to choose from. They're in your quarters now. And you belong anywhere I say you belong. Please, Olivia, it would mean a great deal to me." How could she refuse when he looked at her with such hope? "Of course I'll attend. Thank you for inviting me." "Excellent," Henri beamed. "Now there's one other small matter. Ethan will need an escort for the evening. His usual companion cancelled, and it's important that he not attend alone. The optics matter for our investors. I was hoping you might—" "Absolutely not," Ethan said sharply, speaking for the first time. "Papa, this is absurd. I'll manage alone." "You'll look like you're sulking," Henri replied calmly. "And Olivia needs someone to guide her through the evening, help her navigate the social dynamics." "It's practical for you both." Olivia felt her cheeks burn. "I don't need a babysitter, Henri. And Monsieur Miller clearly doesn't want—" "It's fine," Ethan interrupted, though his jaw was tight. "For my father's sake, I'll escort Miss Parker, but only at the gala itself. I won't pretend this is anything more than a practical arrangement." "Understood," Olivia said coldly. "I wouldn't dream of pretending otherwise." Henri looked between them with barely concealed satisfaction, as if something was going exactly according to plan. "Wonderful. Olivia, the car will take you to Strasbourg tomorrow for hair and makeup. Ethan, try not to scowl so much on Saturday. You'll frighten the donors." The following evening, Olivia stood in her quarters, staring at her reflection in disbelief. The dress Henri had chosen was exquisite, deep emerald silk that hugged her curves before flowing gracefully to the floor. The color made her eyes luminous, her skin porcelain. The hairstylist had tamed her unruly waves into an elegant updo with delicate curls framing her face. She wore her mother's pearl earrings, the only jewelry she'd kept, and subtle makeup that enhanced rather than masked. She looked like she belonged in this world. It was terrifying. Marie appeared to escort her downstairs, and Olivia saw tears in the older woman's eyes. "Oh, my dear, you're absolutely stunning." "Oh." The Christmas gala transformed the estate into a winter wonderland. Every room glowed with candlelight and evergreen garlands. A string quartet played in the grand ballroom, where dozens of elegantly dressed guests mingled beneath glittering chandeliers. Olivia felt her confidence waver at the sight of so much wealth and sophistication. Then she saw Ethan, and her breath caught. He stood at the base of the grand staircase, speaking with guests, and the sight of him in formal attire was arresting. The tailored tuxedo emphasized his athletic build, and his dark hair was perfectly styled. But it was his face that held her, the sharp lines softened by the warm light, making him look less like a businessman and more like something from a classical painting. He looked up as she descended the stairs, and their eyes met. Something flickered in his expression, surprise certainly, but also something deeper that made Olivia's heart race. For a moment the noise of the party faded, and there was only the two of them, connected by a thread of awareness neither could deny. "Miss Parker," Ethan said when she reached him, his voice rougher than usual. "You look appropriate for the evening." It was possibly the worst compliment Olivia had ever received, yet something in his eyes suggested he meant something far more generous. "Thank you, Monsieur Miller. You clean up reasonably well yourself." Was that a hint of a smile? It vanished too quickly to be sure. "Shall we?" He offered his arm stiffly, as if the gesture pained him. Olivia took it, and the simple touch sent electricity up her arm. They moved through the crowd together, and she quickly realized Henri had been right. She needed guidance. The social dynamics were complex, filled with unspoken rules and subtle hierarchies. Ethan, for all his coldness toward her, proved an attentive escort. He introduced her smoothly to donors and business partners, his hand occasionally resting on the small of her back to guide her through conversations. "That's Senator Beaumont," he murmured in her ear as they moved toward the ballroom. "His wife collects rare books. Mention your work with the library. She'll be fascinated." The warmth of his breath against her ear made Olivia shiver. She followed his advice, and indeed, Madame Beaumont engaged her in an enthusiastic discussion about cataloguing techniques. Throughout the evening, Ethan continued offering subtle guidance, and Olivia found herself relaxing, even enjoying herself. Then the music shifted to a waltz, and couples moved to the dance floor. Olivia tensed, preparing to excuse herself. She'd never learned formal dancing, but Ethan's hand was already taking hers. "We should dance," he said. "Not an invitation, but a statement of fact. People are watching." "I don't know how to waltz," Olivia admitted quietly. Something softened in Ethan's expression. "Follow my lead. Trust me." And somehow, impossibly, she did. His hand settled on her waist, warm and steady, while his other hand held hers firmly. As the music began, he guided her through the steps, his movements confident and sure. Olivia stumbled once, but Ethan adjusted smoothly, making it look intentional. "Relax," he murmured. "You're doing fine. Stop thinking so much." "Easy for you to say," Olivia whispered back. "You've probably been doing this since childhood." "Since I was 8, he confirmed. "My mother insisted. She said dancing taught partnership, how to lead and follow, how to communicate without words." His voice held a note of sadness. "I hated the lessons then. Now they're one of my few good memories of her." Olivia looked up at him, seeing the vulnerability beneath his controlled exterior. "She sounds wonderful." "She was," Ethan said simply. For a moment they danced in silence, and Olivia became aware of how close they were, how perfectly they moved together despite being virtual strangers. His hand on her waist felt possessive, protective. His blue eyes held hers with an intensity that made the crowded ballroom fade away. "You surprised me tonight," Ethan admitted quietly. "The way you handled yourself, conversed with people far outside your usual sphere. You're more adaptable than I expected." "Because I'm poor," Olivia challenged softly. "Did you think I'd embarrass you?" "Because you're honest," Ethan corrected. "Most people in this room are wearing masks, saying what others want to hear. But you engage genuinely. It's refreshing and rare." It was the closest thing to a genuine compliment he'd given her. Olivia felt her defenses softening dangerously. "Your father taught me that authenticity matters more than appearance. He practiced what he preached." "He did," Ethan agreed. "And he clearly chose well when he chose you for his library. I've reviewed your work. It's exceptional." "You've been in the library?" Olivia asked, surprised. "Late at night when you're not there. I didn't want to disturb you." "A doom." His thumb brushed her waist absently, sending heat through the silk. "You have a gift for this work, Olivia. You see the value in things others overlook." The use of her first name, casual and natural, felt significant, as was the warmth in his voice, the way he looked at her now, not with suspicion, but something far more complicated, something that made Olivia's pulse quicken and her breath shallow. The music ended, but they didn't immediately step apart. The moment stretched, charged with unspoken possibility. Then someone called Ethan's name, and the spell broke. He stepped back, his expression closing off. "I should speak with the board members," he said formally. "Will you be all right alone for a while?" "Of course," Olivia said, though part of her wanted to ask him to stay. She watched him walk away, his posture rigid with control, and wondered what had just happened between them. Whatever it was felt dangerous, like standing at the edge of a cliff and wanting to jump, despite knowing the fall would change everything. The evening continued with more conversations and introductions, but Olivia's attention kept drifting to Ethan. She saw him across the room, commanding every space he entered, yet occasionally his gaze would find hers, holding for a heartbeat before looking away. Each glance felt like a question neither of them knew how to ask. Near midnight, Olivia slipped away to the terrace for air. The night was cold but clear, stars brilliant against the dark sky. She stood at the stone railing, breathing deeply, trying to sort through the confusion of emotions swirling inside her. Running away? She turned to find Ethan standing in the doorway, his tuxedo jacket draped over his arm, his shirt sleeves rolled up. He looked tired, but less guarded than usual. "Just needed a moment," Olivia admitted. "It's overwhelming being in that world. Everyone's so perfect, so polished. It's exhausting," Ethan agreed, moving to stand beside her at the railing. "Most of them are performing, maintaining images. Very few are actually happy." "Are you?" The question slipped out before Olivia could stop it. "Happy, I mean." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the snow-covered gardens. "I don't think about happiness much. Success, yes. Control, certainly. But happiness?" He shook his head. "That seems like a luxury I can't afford." "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard," Olivia said softly. He looked at her sharply. "Why? I have everything. Money, power, respect. But no joy," Olivia observed. "No spontaneity. No one to share it with." I have my father, Ethan said defensively, whom you keep at arm's length because you're terrified of losing him like you lost your mother. The words came out more bluntly than Olivia intended, but they were true. Ethan's jaw tightened. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? Olivia turned to face him fully. Henri told me you took care of everything when your mother died. The business, the household, even his grief. You were 16 and became the adult because someone had to. That's not strength, Ethan. That's trauma pretending to be control. You have no right. You're right, I don't, Olivia interrupted. We barely know each other. But I know what it's like to lose parents and have to become someone else overnight. I know how it feels to sacrifice your own needs because others depend on you. And I know how lonely it is when everyone sees your strength, but no one sees your pain. Ethan stared at her, his expression a storm of emotions. Why do you care? Because your father loves you, Olivia said simply. And because beneath all that armor, I think you're as lost as I am, just better at hiding it. The silence stretched between them, heavy with truth. Then Ethan did something that shocked them both. He reached out and tucked a loose curl behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. The gesture was tender, almost involuntary, and it made Olivia's breath catch. You see too much, he whispered. Maybe someone needs to, Olivia whispered back. They stood there, inches apart, the night cold around them but heat building between them. Ethan's thumb traced her jawline, and Olivia's eyes fluttered closed at the sensation. She felt him lean closer, his breath mingling with hers, the moment suspended in possibility. Then the terrace door opened, and guests spilled out, laughing and loud. Ethan jerked back as if burned, his walls slamming back into place with almost audible force. This was a mistake, he said roughly. I should go. Good night, Miss Parker. He was gone before Olivia could respond, leaving her alone on the terrace with her racing heart and the ghost of his touch still warming her skin. She pressed her hand to her cheek, where his fingers had been, and realized with dawning horror that she'd just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. She was falling for Ethan Miller, the man who'd accused her of being a con artist, the man who built walls so high no one could reach him, the man whose kiss she'd almost received and now desperately wanted, despite every rational thought, screaming that this path led only to heartbreak. Inside, the party continued, oblivious to the storm brewing in two wounded hearts that had somehow found each other in the most unlikely way possible. Henri watched from a window, a knowing smile on his weathered face. His plan was working better than he'd dared hope. But neither Olivia nor Ethan were ready for what came next. Because love, when it finally breaks through walls, built from grief and fear, doesn't arrive gently. It comes like a storm, destroying everything in its path, including the lies we tell ourselves to feel safe. The week after the gala passed in painful awkwardness. Ethan avoided Olivia entirely, working from his Paris office and returning to the estate only late at night. Olivia threw herself into the library, working long hours to distract herself from the ache in her chest and the memory of his almost kiss that haunted her dreams. Henri, meanwhile, grew increasingly frail. His heart condition, managed for years, seemed to be worsening. He tired easily, needed frequent rest, and Marie confided to Olivia that he'd been refusing some treatments, saying he was tired of fighting. He's giving up, Marie said tearfully one afternoon. And without Monsieur Ethan here, there's no one who can convince him otherwise. That evening, Olivia made a decision. She found Henri in his study, staring at photographs of his late wife. The sight of him, so diminished, so weary, broke her heart. Henri, she said softly, kneeling beside his chair, talk to me. What's happening? The old man smiled sadly. I'm old, my dear. That's what's happening. My body is reminding me that nothing lasts forever. You're refusing treatment, Olivia said gently. Why? Henry sighed deeply. What's the point? I've built an empire, yes. I've lived a full life, but I've also failed at what matters most, being a father to my son. Ethan and I barely speak anymore. He sees me as a burden, a vulnerability. Perhaps it's time to stop being one. That's not true, Olivia insisted. Ethan loves you desperately. He's terrified of losing you. That's why he reacted so strongly when you disappeared. Not because you're a burden, but because you're everything to him. Then why does he avoid me? Why does he build walls between us? Because he's afraid, Olivia said simply, and because he never learned how to be vulnerable without feeling weak. Henri, you need to call him home. You need to tell him what's happening with your health, and you both need to talk, really talk, about your relationship before it's too late. Henri studied her with those wise grey eyes. You care about him. It wasn't a question. Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks. I barely know him. But you see him, Henry persisted. You see past the armor to the wounded boy underneath. That's rare, Olivia. Most people never get past his defenses. It doesn't matter what I see, Olivia said quietly. He's made it clear he wants nothing to do with me beyond professional courtesy. And honestly, Henri, I can't afford to care about someone so determined to push everyone away. I've had enough loss in my life. Love isn't about affordability, Henri said with gentle wisdom. It's about courage, the courage to risk being hurt for the possibility of being whole. Before Olivia could respond, commotion erupted downstairs, raised voices, hurried footsteps. Marie burst into the study, her face pale. Monsieur Ethan is here, and he's furious. Something about business documents that weren't signed, about Monsieur Henri missing critical meetings. Ethan appeared in the doorway, and Olivia's breath caught. He looked terrible, exhausted, rumpled, his tie askew, and his eyes wild with barely controlled emotion. Papa, what the hell is going on? Your doctors called me. They said you've been refusing treatment, missing appointments. And I find out from strangers, not from you. Ethan, calm down, Henry began. Calm down, Ethan's voice rose. You're letting yourself die, and I'm supposed to be calm. After everything, after I've spent 20 years trying to keep you safe, healthy, alive, you're just giving up? I'm tired, son, Henry said quietly. Tired of fighting, tired of being managed like one of your business assets. I want to live what time I have left on my own terms. Even if those terms kill you? Ethan's voice cracked. Even if it means leaving me alone? The raw pain in those words hung in the air. Olivia moved to leave, sensing this conversation needed privacy, but Ethan's gaze snapped to her. Don't. Stay. You're part of this now, apparently. My father confides in you more than in me. That's not fair, Olivia said quietly. Fair? Ethan laughed bitterly. Nothing about this is fair. I've dedicated my entire adult life to protecting him, building security around him, ensuring he has the best care possible. And he runs away to hide in alleys, then brings home strangers. He stopped abruptly, realizing what he'd said. Is that what I am? Olivia asked, hurt bleeding into her voice. Still just a stranger you resent? Ethan's expression twisted with conflict. I don't know what you are. I don't know what any of this is. All I know is that my father is dying, and somehow I'm losing him even though he's standing right here. The anguish in his voice finally broke through Henri's resolve. Ethan, the old man said, struggling to his feet. Sit down, both of you. It's time we all spoke truthfully. What followed was the most honest conversation the Miller family had shared in 20 years. Henry spoke about his loneliness after his wife died, how he'd let Ethan shoulder burdens no teenager should carry, how his pride in Ethan's success had come with guilt for the childhood sacrificed, how he'd eventually felt more like an obligation than a father. Ethan, in turn, spoke about his terror when his mother died, his desperate need to control everything so nothing else could be lost, how success became armor, how building an empire gave him purpose when grief threatened to consume him, how he loved his father desperately but had forgotten how to show it beyond providing safety and wealth. And Olivia, watching them both, saw the tragic cycle. Two people who loved each other deeply but had forgotten how to bridge the distance between them. This is why I ran away, Henri said finally. I needed to remember what it felt like to be human, not just protected, and Olivia showed me that. She saw me as a person, not a fortune or a responsibility. She gave me dignity through simple kindness. Ethan looked at Olivia then, really looked at her, and she saw understanding dawn in his eyes. You didn't help him for money or access. You just helped him. Yes, Olivia said simply, because it was right, because he needed help. And I accused you of being a con artist, Ethan said, his voice rough with regret. I destroyed your reputation, your job prospects. I treated you like a threat when you were the opposite. You were protecting someone you love, Olivia replied gently. I understand that now, though your methods were terrible, she added with a slight smile. Ethan surprised them both by laughing, a real laugh, tired and self-deprecating. My methods are always terrible. I'm better at hostile takeovers than human relationships. Then perhaps, Henry said carefully, it's time to learn different methods. Ethan, I'll resume my treatments, all of them, if you agree to something. Weekly dinners, just you.